Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaia Donaldson, and my guest today is Mike Ruppert, who's known through the whole peak oil community all over the place. Thank you for joining me. Mike
Pleasure.
is a former narcotics cop from LA, publisher of From the Wilderness, and author of Crossing the Rubicon, in which you were turning over so many stones and making so many connections between peak oil and government and economics. And I want to say that those of us out here in the hinterland will really read From the Wilderness. It's sort of like one of those gospel things that's sort of always on the radar. It's like we are relying on your sniffing out those deeper connections the rest of us aren't.
I have a lot of help sniffing. I got some really great writers and some great people and some great thinkers who have helped make FTW, what we call it, great. But yeah, thank you. It's, you know, we don't hear that a lot. I mean, I sit trapped behind a computer for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and I don't get a lot of that feedback a lot. But that's nice in all of our writers, I'm sure.
Well, I got to tell you that in our community, in our little localization group, every now and then when you hit one of the blockbusters, you know, I'll copy it and send it to everybody, because not everybody's a subscriber, so, you know, most of us are, but not every, and it's like, those are the things that are part of the glue that's keeping this network happening, is those indicators that you're getting. So let's look, you know, where are you, what's hot, what's up for you?
Well, we've just recently relocated to Southern Oregon.
Yeah.
And
out of LA.
Yes.
We all watched that
Thank
one real
God.
carefully, saying, if Mike is leaving, the rats are leaving the ship.
Thank you for calling me a rat.
Well, the sinking ship.
You know, the smart rats. You know, I've looked around in many places. I've scoured the Pacific Northwest, and basically the question was sustainability in a place where I felt comfortable. It's not just that Southern Oregon or the Pacific Northwest is the only place where sustainability is achievable in the face of peak oil. It's achievable in many places. But this is the place that, after looking around for a long time, I just intuitively felt this is home. This is where I want to be. And it's a magic place. We're undergoing a lot of changes. We've had some major challenges throughout the 8.5 years we've been in publication, a big one since we moved here. But I think my sense is also, as I've heard other people say on your show, one of time. Tempus fugit. We are now in the summer of 2006, I think, on the brink of an imminent economic collapse. All the warning indicators are there. And we are, and I think there's very good evidence now that we're probably at peak oil.
Right, and in a sense, it doesn't matter exactly when peak oil happens. Is that the demand and supply are just, the gap is so widening.
Plus we got 55 oil-producing nations now in permanent decline, and Platts, one of the most respected journals, has said they believe Saudi Arabia has entered decline. And at that point,
it's over. We're on the downhill.
Exactly.
We're downside. But you're also watching. I mean, you were talking about the economics, the geopolitics.
Right.
I mean, I feel like when I read From the Wilderness, you're checking the money side of things, because that's really what's going to hit us first, or we're going to feel it first.
Right.
Imminent decline.
Imminent decline. On the economic side, the dollar is under enormous pressure. We see the Fed raising interest rates, and we see the Dow the Dow Jones starting to take big hits. But what's more is that it's very clear around the world that the rest of the world is sensing the collapse of the American empire. We're overextended militarily. We're getting our butts kicked in Iraq. We have scandal after scandal in the military now, and it is clear that we are an empire on the brink of decline. The economic stuff will happen, I think, first, but you know, there's variables here that we can't control. One more major hurricane in the Gulf and we're toast.
Sure.
Unrest in Nigeria, West Africa. So, I mean, it's like we're all holding our breath right now. Don't turn colors.
Okay, so, so Mike, you want to talk about sort of where are you going to head with all of this? Are you going to keep, you know, pounding? What's up next for the movement, maybe?
Well, what I'm aware of,
because you said you've decided. You said what, a little over a year and a half ago, you're going to stop preaching to the neophytes, you know, about peak oil is coming. Peak oil is coming, right? You've changed tacks.
I'm changing a lot of tacks.
Tell us about it.
I mean, I'm 55 years old now, and I'm, you know, I've been a pioneer, if you will. I was talking to a colleague, a dear friend, Megan Quinn of Community Solutions in Ohio, who is like the next generation coming up. And boy, are the old guys here kind of glad to see a generation with that kind of talent and that kind of dedication coming up.
Yes.
So there is kind of a handoff and an evolution. I've been fighting the hard good fight for a long time. And to quote Megan Quinn, she came up with this line on a radio show I saw her do in Oregon here, where she said, "I'm not really preaching to the choir, I'm preaching to the preachers." And I think that's kind of what I need to do now. I feel, you know, I've been producing, and we've been turning out stories at From the Wilderness. Now we have more original stories on peak oil than any other site on the web. More original reporting on, and you know, we've been doing it now for 5+ years. And what's gratifying for me is to see how the yeast is leavening the loaf. I mean, we see these signs everywhere, signs following that a lot of people are getting it, that the answer is local, the answer is localization, and it's happening in places I can't imagine. I think if I would ask what my heart wants to do,
Go.
Okay, I am fascinated with Latin America. As I study world evolution around peak oil, and as we see collapse and the downside of peak, break up globalization, because global transportation is not going to be possible.
Right.
So geography will be the trump card, and I have great respect and admiration, and boy, the Republicans are going to crucify me for this, for Presidente Hugo Chavez of Venezuela.
Yes, I do too. He's been a pretty remarkable, clear, strong voice.
Well, what's happening in Latin America is is starting to make all the right moves to become self-sustaining within the region. And there's kind of a miracle down there. Now, if you talk about lifeboats, I mean, people don't want to hear the bad news, you know, the worst news. And sometimes we try to be politically correct. Richard Duncan, one of the foremost names in the peak oil movement, who was at it decades ago with Walter Youngquist and back in, you know, going way back into the days, said, if I want to sum up the whole problem into one word, he said, overpopulation.
Yes.
So people don't
Which is one of those taboos. You do not, I mean, anywhere, even in this movement, you don't talk about that.
That's right. And in America, we have overconsumption. Which
you don't
is
talk
like,
about that one either.
Not in America.
Not here. Right. No.
Consume less, spend less. No.
What do you mean deprive? What do you mean scarcity? No. Right. Big taboos.
You know, and those are the big, and I have not been afraid to utter those words, only because I'm so used to being kicked around the block. It's okay, kick me around the block again. I'm still going to tell you what I think the truth is. But now, with so much being done to encourage local communities, there's a lot of innovation taking place, and no one's keeping track of it all.
I was wondering about that, because there's lots of little things that are great ideas for all of us.
Well, in some cases, it'll be unique to a local region. Like in Iowa, sustainability may have to revolve around corn. In Southern Oregon, it may have to revolve around game or fish or something else.
Right.
But there are ideas being learned and lessons being learned that kind of need to be shared.
Ooh.
And one of my favorite groups, the Post-Carbon Institute, Julian Darley up in Vancouver, is really helping to pioneer and set those things up to exchange information. But, you know, I still look at the political economic thing. Too many people want to look at peak oil and say, okay, or peak energy, the natural gas cliff in North America, et cetera, and say, well, that's all we talk about. No, things don't happen in a vacuum tube.
It's a whole well, you've got a living system here. You've got people and culture and food and energy underlying everything.
Yeah. 98% correlation between GDP growth and greenhouse gas emission for 50+ years.
98.
That's a clue.
98.
That's a clue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back to Latin America.
Well,
what do you see happening there?
Latin America is evolving in a way that shows that it is moving to become sustainable within itself. You see sharing of energy between, and you see massive cooperation now. In other words, Ecuador is having some of its gasoline refined in Venezuela. Colombia and Venezuela. Now, Colombia is like a U.S. proxy state, client state, and Venezuela is, you know, what George Bush would say, this radical commie, you know, whatever. But Venezuela and Colombia are now starting to share energy. They're recognizing the mandate. And the issue is not about politics. The issue is about lifeboats and survival. And Latin America seems to be much more ahead of that curve. Every other region of the world has other problems. Europe has the EU, and basically all of Europe is at the end of a huge Russian natural gas pipeline.
Yes,
Britain has surrendered its energy sovereignty literally to Russia and Gazprom. So, but Latin America has not only the ingredients, but I think a deeply embedded Latin sense of culture and family,
and community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, and it's moving. I mean, with the work I've done in geopolitics, you know, I've been in lectured in 10 countries. I don't remember, a lot. And I've studied different cultures, there's many fewer handicaps in Latin America, but I can tell you that China's aware of peak oil.
Yes,
We
I
know the
expect
U.S.
so.
government's aware of it. You know, that's what Dick Cheney's vice president, the Energy Task Force was that happened right before 9/11.
Right, and your latest thing with all of the military checking out where there's installations of solar or renewables within 100 miles that they could appropriate
Right.
when necessary.
And-
so
and-
we
and-
know they're on.
And the
looking
U.S.
at
military
this.
is moving massively into renewables.
Ah,
The U.S. Army, in a report we just described on the website, Michael Caine, who was one of my writers, who was going to be one of the great leaders of the future, like Megan Quinn and this whole new generation that I'm so relieved to see coming up, pulled from an Army report that they said that peak oil's already happened in a U.S. Army report. So, but what I'm saying is all these countries are aware that peak oil
Right.
is coming. They tend not to want to discuss it because, well, in this country, the mandate is don't disturb the markets.
yes.
Okay, in other countries, it's don't panic the people, whatever the
Okay,
case may
okay.
say. All the governments are making preparations, but Latin America seems to be doing it, trying to make, there's magic there. That's all I can say. There's this Latin thing that they're getting together down there, and that's something I think that really needs to be looked
They're
into.
going to have this tango dance,
Yeah.
right? They're going to just rumba with this.
Maybe a
well,
salsa, I don't know.
Yeah, all right.
Or a flamenco, I don't know.
You can see you make me think about on the food side, some of the innovative things that Frances Moore Lapay wrote about in her Hope's Edge about what they're doing in Porto Alegre, believing it's a right for people to have good nutrition, and having the government of the city having kitchens, I mean, where people can get one good meal a day, where they are, you know, mainly for nearly no cost, and other revolutions that are starting to make it a more people-based
And
operation.
yes, and you know, kind of picking up on that theme, the single greatest obstacle from my years of study, and I know that my colleague Catherine Austin Fitz shares
Yes.
the same opinion, is that we Americans, or let's say the first world in Europe, live in an economic paradigm that demands infinite growth. Money is king, and until you change the way money works, you can change nothing. The other thing I see happening is that regions are now moving in the preliminary steps to set up their own currencies, which is going to protect them when the dollar crashes to one degree or another, a disengagement from the dollar in regional currencies. But a banking and financial system that doesn't need infinite growth to be sustained. There are many, many other ways to create and work money.
When you said, when I read that, and you've said it a number of times, you know, until we change the way money works,
You change
nothing.
Yeah, that's one of my
And I remember
mantras.
sort of scratching my head and say, okay, Mike, be more specific. So now that I have you here, okay, Mike, be more specific.
Okay, well-
How do we need to change that?
Well, first of all, if you're in a prison, before you can build something else, you have to escape from the prison.
Okay. All right.
So, and Catherine Austin Fitz and I are continuing to do work on this, which means disengage. Stop
from
spending.
the current spending
from the-
paradigm.
Okay, how many people have bank accounts with Bank of America, Citibank, Wells Fargo, Bank of
As opposed to
Bank of America, as
what's
opposed
the
to
alternative?
a locally owned bank
Okay.
where the stock is not publicly traded on Wall Street, where it's not
So bank at your small local bank or your small credit union.
that reinvests locally.
That's okay. That reinvests with your own
Okay.
community.
Get out of your major credit cards for the major banks. Stop spending money on AOL, Time Warner. Like how many people are activists out there supporting AOL, Time Warner with their email account just because it's easy?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Disengage from that.
Okay.
In other words, and of course, voting. Every vote may not be counted, but every dollar always is. So spend it.
course.
Spend it in your local community. And
Okay.
I mean, I've been living here in Southern Oregon now for almost 5 months, 4.5, 5 months. And like I've become aware of like 3 local currencies that are developing here now, where people don't even use dollars to do business.
Fabulous.
Now that's a way to protect yourself from the coming economic crash, which is a certainty.
Is built your alternate currencies for your locality for trading things.
Absolutely.
Are they trading hard goods for it yet? I mean, food or
It's happening in different ways all over the place.
That's part of what I'm wondering is that I hear different ideas,
Yep.
and I realize it takes some fair amount of energy to keep that happening or to keep it growing. So that more services and more goods can be traded and more people are using it and so
Absolutely.
on. That's really an effort.
That's critical.
So that's something really important for a localization group to be doing is deal with our food, deal with our medium of exchange?
One of the reasons, well, again, the reason why we're doing this thing today is because we're having a screening of a film here in Oregon, which is the community solution: How Cuba Survived Peak Oil. And one of the reasons why I thought it was so important, aside from the fact that it's a great movie, I've seen it like 5 times. As I wander around this miraculous place, this rogue valley in southern Oregon, we are surrounded here by multiple climate zones, lots of organic agriculture. There are people doing biofuels. There are people, all kinds of things that are necessary to survive peak oil, but none of it's been integrated.
That's right.
It's like everybody's little doing it on their own. And that movie is essential to understand how it needs to integrate to work in a society as a whole. So I'm amazed, and I'm really gratified at the willingness, the eagerness, and the degree to which people all over the country are waking up. CNN will never tell you that.
It's happening quickly. You mentioned Julian Darley and the Post-Carbon Institute. What's really fun on their website is recolocalize.net, and they have a map of the world with little dots for the relocalization groups, and it's like, just on this 2-week trip, it's gone from 104 or 3 or whatever to 105 and counting. It's like, you know, a new one shows up every day or so. It's
That's
like,
right.
That's exciting.
I think that people like Julian Darley and my dear friend Richard Heinberg.
Yes, yes.
And it's amazing that he and I both have the same worldview, having come from such diverse backgrounds. But he and I are kindred spirits, as are many of us on this road. But we see it coming now. I think that the world is woefully unprepared. There's going to be a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth. It's inevitable.
And I think that's part of what the localization groups are trying to just get a handle on, is like, it feels overwhelming. There's a huge amount of things to do, a lot of people to wake up. Where do we focus our energy? Certainly did we get done with what do we do about how the way the money works? I mean, one place is certainly relocalize, put your money locally.
Yeah, I would recommend that people go to Catherine Austin Fitz's website, which is www.solari.com. But the essence of that is to form neighborhood or local stock corporations, where the ownership of the stock or the benefits of the stock, you can do an A-B share. In the big stock, A shares get to vote, B shares don't.
Okay.
The only person who can vote the A shares are the people who live in that community.
Yes.
And the money and the standard of living and the value of the stock is directly correlative to the standard of living. You can't be in a situation like we're in now, where the stock value can go up and the standard of living goes down. That's the way the current economic paradigm works.
That's right.
There's a way to turn money on its head, so that the value of the stock can go up as the quality of life goes up. That's what needs to happen. But before you can do that, you have to completely disengage. And what most people are not aware of is how deeply they've been hypnotically inculcated and programmed like Stepford wives with the old ideas.
Well, and those are, they're sold to us all the time. I mean, the 400 credit card applications you get in the mail and so on for the bigs. And also, I would add, a huge question is, are folks that have got investments. You've got the boomers now just starting to retire, right, with their 401ks and their big portfolios. And the only thing that financial planners are basically, there's certainly some socially responsible investing, so that they're it's not local, but at least you can invest in some good things. But I see that huge gap with, what do you do with folks who are putting their 401ks into mutual funds that are all that game?
The warnings have gone out, and we're at the point now where it's too late. Anybody who believes their fate lies in a 401k with mutual funds based upon a pyramid scheme economy that's based on a housing bubble with mortgage-backed securities and $300 trillion estimated dollars of derivative financing. If you got your money in there and you haven't heard the message yet, there comes a point where you have to say, you made your choice, I can't help you. One of the things that I do when I lecture, and a lot of people think I'm a hard ass for this. Can I say hard ass?
Go for it, sure.
Okay, a lot of people think I'm a hard ass.
You can be real.
All right. The analogy that I use is, you're on the Titanic. It's just been hit by the iceberg. You know the Titanic is going to sink, and slowly, the dawning comes aware. And you've got 3 groups of people on this ship. Now, you know that it's going to sink. You got to build some lifeboats. You can't save everybody.
Right.
You've got one group of people that says, we agree the ship's going to sink, show us how to build a lifeboat. You got another group that's in complete denial and frozen like deer in the headlights.
Let's keep drinking our martinis.
No, that's the third group.
That's the third group?
There's a third group that says, you're full of you-know-what, this ship is unsinkable, you're lying,
That's right.
you're a fear-monger, I'm going back to the bar for a drink.
Okay.
Now, if you're in that position, who do you choose to help? My pocket is ringing.
That is really interesting. You got a call from the Titanic on your cell phone, right?
Yes.
Let's go work on making some lifeboats.
Okay. Then you take the people that are already there and want to know. I'm going to try to.
This is fun.
Yeah, I have to try to.
Call from the universe.
I'm like Inspector Clouseau. Not now, Cato.
Okay.
Okay.
So what you're saying is not everybody's going to be on board. You cannot save everybody.
No, but you also have to recognize that those of us who teach, those of us who have devoted our lives and paid whatever price was necessary to do what we were doing, we are only human. We have finite energy as well.
Yes.
And we have a responsibility to husband our own human and spiritual energy, to spend it wisely where it will derive the most benefit and be most productive. There are still, I mean, America is a horribly codependent, dysfunctional society. And there are people who will argue that you have to go waste your energy hanging onto someone's ankle, walking down the sidewalk who doesn't want to hear you. I say no. You let those people go. You look only for the people who say, there's a problem, show me what to do.
I think we're finding, I mentioned that to a localization group yesterday, is influence the people who are ready to hear. And they may end up influencing the people who are next ready to hear. But as Megan said, if you're preaching to the preachers who are already on board to the story and they can influence their communities, their circles, then well, isn't that how most social movements really happen? You start small with those who you can't, because you can't, get blood out of a turnip, that whole thing. It's like we're going to waste a lot of energy if we try to do that.
Look, I got to be honest, I think this is unlike any other social movement in human history.
Well, we are at a peak moment, right?
Yeah.
Population, consumption, resource decline all over the planet.
This is the single biggest event in human history.
Yeah.
And people are in denial about it. So, I mean, as I distill all my years of experience, and I have had to develop a spiritual outlook on life. And religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell, and spirituality is for those who've already been there. That's my attitude. So, taking a spiritual look to this, I hear and I see and I feel the universe saying to the human race, either evolve or perish. It's up to you. Yes. You can either learn how to live in harmony, peaceful coexistence with the planet, or you can go. The planet will remain.
And just within the last, few decades, with people like Lovelock having the Gaia hypothesis, the sense that this planet operates as if it were a self-renewing life system. We're just part of that. We're some of those little, bugs or parasites or whatever we're going to end up being. And we're just part of that. If we aren't going to be able to come in balance with this, she'll do some cleansing.
I think that, one thing that I've heard about with respect to global warming, and it's all a man-made crisis, that are man-made crises that are impinging, is that it's like planet Earth has a fever, global warming, to rid itself of an infection.
Yes.
Now, the question is, are we going to learn or are we not? And of course, I don't think that the human race is going to suddenly wake up overnight and go, My hope, my future look, as I enter probably the last productive phase of my life at 55, which is going to be different from the combat, the hard work and everything else. I don't know what it's going to be yet. Is that we want to prepare those who are going to have to face challenges much, much more difficult than you or I will ever see.
So our job is to look with the younger people.
Absolutely.
Well, that's really what, in the evolution of the human family, one of the things that I'd read is this grandmothers and aunts and uncles that have helped make sure the young people got raised and got enough food in the early hunter-gatherer times. So we get to be the uncles and the grandparents here for the young folks who are going to have to all be farming. That we aren't, it's not happening in our lifetime.
Right.
It feels to me that we're boomers, right?
Yep.
And we've gotten to live in that glorious, wonderful boom of all kinds of things, in this life. Population and consumption and well-being and health and long life and so on. It's our gift. This is moral for me. This is the spiritual part. This is what we have to give back.
You're going to love this.
Okay.
My book, Crossing the Rubicon,
Yes.
The Decline of the American Empire at the End of the Age of Oil.
Right.
Now in French, and hopefully soon we'll announce a Spanish
bien.
contract. But it's just been taken into the Harvard Business School library, which for me is like a, oh,
Yes!
yes. All those 1,000 footnotes were good for something.
Yes!
They checked them and said, okay, put the book in. But every time I autograph one for anyone who's like under 30, almost every time I start off with, I'm sorry. We're leaving you a hell of a mess. I use really bad words in that sometimes. And hopefully this is something that we can pass on to a generation that we're leaving a can of worms to, or future generations, that will help them, and at least let them know that there were some people living in our age, of our era, of our...
Who knew it was happening.
And who tried to make it better for them, yeah. Because I've never had kids,
Me neither.
So
Some of us, I think, came in at this time knowing we had major instructions to something to do, and the kids are all the kids, all the people that are reading your books and watching the website. Those are your kids.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. And you talk about this life path as if we are my life experience is that I was drug kicking all the way through it. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to do this. But here we are.
Yep.
And it's like Albert Einstein said, once you know there's a God, it doesn't make any difference whether you believe in one. And so we've had that experience. And what makes me, I would feel horribly unfulfilled if I didn't see a younger generation of leadership coming up who got the message, to whom we could feel comfortable handing off the baton.
Well, thank you for doing a whole lot of spade work.
With my
whole
nose.
lot.
And my chin. Yeah.
And great courage. I mean, you've
Great stupidity.
Well,
I'm teasing. Thank you. I'll take the compliment.
Because some of the rest of us don't have the constitutions or the stomachs or the noses for that. So you've done some of that hard work, and I am pleased that we've got younger people that you can hand it over.
Yeah.
Thanks for the good work. Mike Ruppert.
That's me.
From the wilderness. This is a peak moment, and if it doesn't look like a peak moment, you just missed it. I'm Janaia Donaldson. Join us next time.
Not now, Keto.